So this is my family in the early 90s. And we came to the United States as refugees, actually, leaving Russia in 1989. You may recognize me. I'm in the front row. And my parents are next to me, and in the back are my grandparents. And so coming to the U.S. as refugees, we were expecting everything here to be better. And for the most part, that was true. But there was one notable exception, and that was math education. And math education was very important to my family. My dad was a mathematician. My mom was an engineer. My dad's mom had been a math teacher her whole life, and my mom's dad had been a college physics teacher. So this was an important value for them, and they were concerned. And I'd say the most concerning moment was when my grandmother, the math teacher, after I finished and passed an Algebra 1 course, gave me 2 fractions to add. And I added the numerators and I added the denominators. And as it turns out, this is not how you're supposed to add fractions. And my grandmother was absolutely shocked and scandalized, because in her 30 years of teaching, not even her worst F students would have done this after an Algebra 1 course. And so she went to my parents and she said, "What is happening with my grandson?" So basically, and then she sat down and she tutored me, and she uncovered what the problem was. The way I had been taught was completely discombobulated. So I was taught superficially how to follow procedures, and then you pass the test, you forget about it, you move on to the next class. No understanding. Instead of algebra being built on arithmetic and arithmetic being based on understanding of numbers, it was all just superficial knowledge, which I immediately forgot. So she tutored me. She filled in those gaps, and I still remember those sessions. And there was another wonderful thing that happened, which is that during high school, I had the great fortune to go to math camp, which was absolutely amazing. And in math camp, I fell in love with math. They got me so excited. After those 5 weeks, I said, okay, I'm going to be a mathematician. And because my grandmother had filled in those gaps, it was actually possible. So I had the background. And I ended up becoming a mathematician eventually. But that really got my parents thinking. So I had 2 huge strokes of luck. I had this grandmother who was an amazing math teacher, and I had the opportunity to go to math camp. And how many kids have either of those 2 things, much less both of those? So that sort of got my dad in particular thinking about the problem. And if you think about it, well, math education should be easy, right? Just talk to the teachers and get them to teach math better. And this is very common. Well, it's the teacher's fault. And in fact, that's not true at all, and the problem is much more complicated than that. And you find this out if you compare U.S. math education with countries that are very strong in math education. What you find is that teachers in those countries have a whole host of supports that the teachers in the U.S. are missing. So, for example, outstanding textbooks in mathematics. Without that, there's not much that you can do. Lesson plans from previous generations of teachers that have been perfected that those teachers can use in their classrooms. Pre-service, so before teachers even start to work as teachers in their teacher colleges, excellent pre-service courses that give teachers really deep knowledge of mathematics. In-service, so while they're already working as teachers, professional learning opportunities. So it's really a very complex system. It's an ecosystem of supports for instruction that makes good instruction possible. And if you don't have these things, then unfortunately, there's just nothing that can be done. And so my dad had been doing research in a type of artificial intelligence called expert systems. And he had an idea to apply some ideas from expert systems to try to get around this problem, to try to get around all of these huge challenges that make it hard to actually improve math education on a large scale. And so the idea of an expert system is, say you have some sort of human experts whose expertise is very scarce. So for example, expert medical diagnosticians are a good example. And so typically, you'd want every patient to have access to these wonderful diagnosticians, but they're so scarce, very few patients actually do. So what you do is you sit down with them and you interview them and you extract their thought process. So how do they reason? How do they make decisions? What's all the knowledge that they use? In the case of medical diagnostics, when do they know to run a certain test? How do they interpret the results of tests and draw conclusions? And then you build all that knowledge into a computer system which runs the same thought process that you just got from these experts. And so it's a way of taking this expertise that's very scarce, that very few people have access to, and automating it so that you can make it available to many more people. And so my dad's idea was, can you try to apply this to education? Is there some way that this can make really high-quality math instruction available to more students? And so he came to me and my mom, and at this time I was in high school, and he said, I have this idea, why don't we try it out? And fools that we were, we said, this sounds great, let's do this family project. And so Reasoning Mind was born. And Reasoning Mind is a nonprofit organization based here in Houston. And this is what we do. We develop software, and then we partner with schools to implement this in classrooms. And then we also work with teachers and with the schools.